Hey guys, it's Chelsea here, and I'm just popping in to let you know about the Society at TFD, our exclusive members-only community available to join here on our YouTube channel, as well as on Patreon. If you want to support TFD and the special projects we work on, like fan favorite podcast Too Good to Be True, we'd love for you to join. Giving to TFD directly is the best way to ensure that we can keep making the content you most want from us. The Society is available both on YouTube and Patreon, and before you ask, the membership offerings are very similar on both platforms, so you only need to join one. Some people prefer YouTube, so join us there. Prefer Patreon? Join us there. And since you guys have been asking for clarification, here's a breakdown of what you guys get for each tier on each platform. On YouTube, our membership tiers are $2.99 and $4.99. For $2.99, you get loyalty badges and moan emojis on YouTube, 40% off TFD digital events, monthly office hours with Chelsea, access to our Discord community, access to our monthly book club, and access to our questions answered by me or guests on the Financial Confessions. For $4.99, you get everything from the $2.99 tier, plus exclusive ad-free videos each month where you can catch me rant about Dave Ramsey, TikTok face, girl bossing, Goop, and so much more. Entire backlog of ad-free bonus videos, 50% off TFD live digital events on everything from $12 workshops to $199 courses, priority access to get your questions answered by me or guests on the Financial Confessions. And over on Patreon, our tiers are $7 and $12. For $7 a month, you get exclusive ad-free videos each month, our entire backlog of ad-free bonus videos, 50% off TFD live digital events on everything from $12 workshops to $199 courses, monthly office hours with Chelsea, access to our Discord community, access to our book club, automatic enrollment in exclusive Patreon-only newsletters, priority voting on the monthly book club selection, and priority access to get your questions answered by me or guests on the Financial Confessions. For $12, you get everything from the $7 level, plus our weekly Ask TFD Anything newsletter, where you get your personal questions answered by the TFD team. No topic is too small or too big to ask. The Society has something for everyone, so click the link in the description of this episode to join us on your preferred platform.
And Muffy, you'll want to... It's time to shake up a cocktail and tie a...
What are you trying to do?
The horrible mid-Atlantic accent. It's time to... Wait, what are they... what's the thing about a boat? And Muffy, it's time to put on your boat shoes and shake up a cocktail. I sound like Tim Curry. Yeah, put on those Sperry's and shake up a dry martini. It's time to talk about old money. So today, as the title suggests, I want to talk about old money and our not that new, but newly really intense fascination with it. So for those who aren't following my TikTok, and if so, why not, honey? I recently had a TikTok go a little bit viral about my experience working at a yacht club, which I have talked about before on this channel, with tons and tons of people in the comments talking about their own experiences working for similar members-only clubs. Mine happened to be a yacht club, which is essentially a country club where you also have a boat, but many people have country clubs that are centered around golf courses or just sort of being rich in the same room together. Because at the end of the day, for most private members-only clubs, that is the point. Now, as I've spoken about before on this channel, a lot of my early working life was defined by working for really, really rich people. And there were ways in which I chose that intentionally because it was beneficial. But there were also ways in which it was insanely degrading and, quite frankly, pretty disillusioning. A lot of the behavior and norms that I saw while working in these ultra-exclusive environments gave me a very harsh awakening as to what extreme wealth and privilege actually looks like behind closed doors. And the answer is it's not pretty. And as we've also talked about many times on this channel, being very wealthy also does not necessarily confer feeling great in life. You're often more socially isolated. There is enormous pressure to be constantly spiraling upwards in terms of earning potential, and your communities are often reduced down to fewer and fewer people who you can actually call peers, while almost everyone else in your life is someone you pay to be there, or in some cases pay not to see. And old money in particular holds a very specific luster because although in America the most prevalent dream is one of someone starting from nothing and ending up super wealthy, which is also, as we've discussed many times on this channel, a huge myth. Our social mobility is actually fairly low. Even amongst the wealthy, there is a particular allure of people who were to the manor born and have never once in generations had to question their social standing. And on places like TikTok, the concept of dressing like your new money or acting like your new money or aping some of their mannerisms or habits or preferences has exploded in popularity. But before we get into it, we should define what this sort of old money aesthetic really is. So in its current iteration, again, especially through the eyes of, for example, TikTok users who have probably never even spent time around old money, let alone embody it themselves, it's a sort of vague amalgamation of your average preppy style, mixed with a kind of coastal grandmother aesthetic for women, and for many people, a dash of succession chic. And for those who may not know, the coastal grandmother aesthetic can be described thusly as put in Marie Claire. When coastal grandmothers tire from pruning their hydrangea bushes, they grab a nice, crisp, chilled glass of Sauvignon Blanc and that juicy mystery novel from the weekly book club, and bonus points for real estate overlooking the ocean. Adjacencies to the coastal grandma lifestyle include any main character that screenwriter Nancy Meyers has created, any combination of khakis and stripes Martha Stewart has worn, any excellent olive oil that Ina Garten would use, or Oprah at peak heirloom season. And as for the Succession flavor, which is currently my favorite show on television because I am a basic with basic tastes, it has the dubious distinction of often featuring different strains of old money style and ultra elite fashion within the same episode. From a New Yorker article on the subject of the show's fashion, in another episode, the Roys travel to a New England estate to meet another billionaire family, the Pierces, who own a left-leaning media juggernaut that Logan intends to buy. Compared to the Roy family homes, the Pierces' turn haven is shabby chic. Chintz, worn Chesterfield sofas, paisley bedspreads. The family matriarch, played by Cherry Jones, wears plain, almost Quaker-like clothes, a crisp white shirt, a single string of pearls that telegraph generations of inherited wealth. The Pierces are not ostentatious, the costume designer told me. I could see one of the sons wearing the sweater his grandfather wore 20 years ago. They have absolutely nothing to prove. In some ways, though, the senses of the Pierces and the Roys are not that far apart. During a cocktail gathering at which each Roy sibling is assigned to talk up a family member of the Pierce family, the camera pans out, revealing nothing but dull tones of camel, dusty rose, navy blue, brown, and off-white. The decor is as bloodless as the small talk. And this style has simply exploded in popularity on social media over the past few years, and especially in the past 12 months, to the extent that basically every influencer and fashion magazine has created their own guide to the style or has demonstrated their own spin on it. And even on social media, it tends to vary between people who actually might embody that lifestyle themselves, giving glimpses into their life, to people who are trying to recreate the aesthetic through primarily things like fast fashion clothes, which is obviously in many ways the worst of both worlds. But the fact that it's so popular now does seem to feel somewhat in line with the extent to which younger generations are increasingly removed from any semblance of financial stability or security, let alone exorbitant wealth. The average person is never even going to come in contact with the kind of people who can afford to wear subtle, discreet designer wardrobes that they can treat like garbage, while they pull into their slip at their yacht club with the schooner that's been in their family for decades. Unless, of course, like my former self, they happen to be working for them. But it makes total sense that as we get further and further away from these ideals, we become more and more fascinated with them. As one Harper's Bazaar article put it, the term old money and the lifestyle and status that come with it has been a point of fascination for decades. The secret lives and unspoken codes of the obscenely wealthy have served as a backdrop for countless films and television shows, inspired many a novel, and in essence been the gold standard of what one can achieve under capitalism. For the most part, it was a lifestyle that lived in the realm of dreams, under the guise of if you work hard enough, you too can live like this. And now the ideal of old money has hit the eyes of younger generations thanks to social media. In short, this recent rise in young people's infatuation with exorbitant wealth feels paradoxically at odds with and also symptomatic of a period of economic instability. Several economic theories may be able to explain Gen Z's move into a more demure style and subsequent shift away from the glitzy Y2K looks. For example, in 1926, economist George Taylor coined the hemline index, theorizing that women's skirts get shorter during times of financial prosperity and longer in a recession. Then there's former IBM consumer products expert Trevor Davis, who conducted a study which found that long periods of recession led to the height of high heels getting lower. In short, we are casting away sky-high platforms and miniskirts in favor of more demure styles. Now, don't get me wrong, even though old money style might have the appearance of being demure, it is not actually in and of itself a demure or modest style. In fact, real old money style is in many ways the most maximally relevant embodiment of what is called a Veblen good, a phenomenon that we've talked about a few times before on the channel. As Investopedia explains it, a Veblen good is a good for which demand increases as the price increases due to its exclusive nature and appeal as a status symbol. This runs counter to the prevailing circumstance of demand falling as prices rise. Thus, a Veblen good has an upward sloping demand curve rather than the typical downward sloping curve. Few things could embody this more acutely than the preference that the ultra-wealthy often have for the most discreet clothing that only other ultra-wealthy people can recognize, which is why you'll often find the ultra-wealthy opting for styles that to an untrained eye might look like you bought it at Target, but in reality, to those in the know, very clearly cost insane amounts of money, things like the Row, Brunello Cucinelli, and others. The fascination with a certain type of wealth as subconsciously on some level being better than other kinds of wealth, more aspirational, more relevant, more desirable, is at the end of the day just not a good strategy long term. Ultimately, whether wealth is inherited or gotten through extreme corporate maneuvering in one single generation, we simply shouldn't have the level of extreme wealth and inequality that we currently do. Just because one version of wealth happens to be more discreet doesn't mean that it's better. And the tendency to fetishize any kind of wealth ultimately just undermines the essential kinds of class consciousness that basically everyone outside of a few very core wealthy people need to develop. But on the other hand, if we look at it from a purely aesthetic perspective, there can be some good to the embracing of the old money aesthetic en masse as opposed to the more flashy new money style. In the sense that much of the aesthetic of old money is about inheritance, there's often a fundamental quality of garments lasting long term, being passed down through generations, etc. This lends itself more naturally to, say, vintage or secondhand shopping as opposed to buying fast fashion, and to a more general ethos of fashion that is based on heritage and durability rather than trends and ephemerality. And though quiet luxury can often still be very much caught up in the pointless upwards trajectory of all Veblen goods, as we've discussed, there is a benefit to breaking the stranglehold that labels and logos have had on consumers for years. As someone who's been around a lot of different levels of wealth, including very, very wealthy people who've had money for a very long time, interestingly, sometimes you find that the very oldest money isn't even really all that interested in designers at all, and are often wearing tattered shit that they've had for years and never bothered to replace. And if there were any aesthetic that we could all probably benefit from imitating, at least from a consumer/environmental perspective, it would be the one that has us keeping the same ratty sweater for decades on end. A recent New York Post article broke down the popular TikToks of one creator who worked and moved in very elite circles and explains many of the nuances of old money culture. As the article puts it, while designer items with flashy logos seem to indicate luxury, Van Doren debunked that theory. In fact, she insists that her wealthy neighbors wouldn't dare buy a Louis Vuitton bag or anything dripping in logos. "Thou shalt not purchase Louis Vuitton," she declared, "especially anything with a logo on it, unless you want people to think you're poor. Posting photos of ski trips or vacations is also unworldly," she noted. "Really, social media participation is frowned upon," she said, adding that the elite also snub red-bottom Louboutins. So while on some level there can be that feeling of, well, no one can win, because the styles and trends and logos and designers that one group of wealthy people are saying are important are the exact same ones that another group of wealthy people are saying are totally gauche. The truth is that they're all wrong. We should just wear whatever we want and feel good in. But on a more sustainable note, it's important to remember that at the end of the day, overconsumption is a problem at any wealth level. And if the one thing we can take from the old money trend is the idea of investing in quality pieces that we keep for very long periods of time, and often buy secondhand or vintage when possible, that will have been a good thing. But the broader point will still remain that we do need to be eating the rich, no matter what they happen to be wearing.
And now it's time for our Society Questions of the Week. For those who don't know, every week on my Tuesday show, I answer 2 questions asked to me by members of our society at TFD, which comes with tons of other benefits besides just asking these questions. And you can join by hitting the join button right below this video, or by joining us at Patreon, which is also linked below the video. So the first question asks, lately I find myself thinking more and more about building community and solidarity as spaces for resistance, for imagining alternatives to our current system. I guess my question is, how do you envision practicing solidarity in everyday life beyond giving and volunteering? Like, how do we move beyond competition and feeling constantly lagging behind and more towards helping and sharing? I'm going to answer this question in a way that may seem kind of counterproductive, but it's something that I think about all the time. And it's also something that's really dawned on me since I stopped using Twitter about a month ago, which is one of the primary online spaces where I was engaging in a lot of like political and social kind of chatter. So I think one thing that progressives often do that kind of really shoots themselves in the foot is put an undue amount of pressure on themselves to live in a way that is totally aligned with their beliefs and is sort of maximizing their goodness and their sort of social value towards causes that they believe in at all times. And I think that this is just not realistic for human beings to live that way. I think if you're the kind of person who asks a question like this, which is already a very small percentile of human beings even think in these terms. Beyond that, people who are already volunteering, already donating, already giving of their time and money and energy to the causes that they believe in, you are talking about being in an extremely high percentile of people who are living their values. Most people don't even vote in most elections. Most people don't give a shit about any of this stuff. And I'm not saying that's a reason not to care, but I'm saying that it's a reason to give yourself a good amount of grace and frankly acknowledge the immense amount of effort you're already putting into these things when compared to the average person. To me, it sounds like you're doing more than enough. It sounds like you're living in a way that is really ethical and thoughtful and adds a lot of value to the communities and causes that you believe in. But as someone who does volunteer, for various political causes, who donates to, various organizations, mutual aid funds, etc., even individuals, I very much live by the practice that I focus on what I can do that's productive. I do a few things, maybe a day, maybe a week, maybe a month, and then I move on with my life. And I don't constantly worry about whether or not I'm doing enough, because at the end of the day, I'm also a human being with a life to live, with friends, with family, with food to cook, with errands to run, with things to take care of. And like I said at the beginning, I think oftentimes progressives can really bog themselves down with not feeling like they're ever good enough. You're already doing a lot more than most. I think you can just be happy with that. The second question today says, I'm in my 20s and I'm soon starting a new job where I'm salaried, which is totally new to me. I've always been paid hourly. For the most part, I'm excited about this, but I'm apprehensive about not being paid for overtime and being in a situation where I'm expected to stay late for no discernible reason and to answer work-related calls and messages after work hours. Do you have any advice for getting off on the right foot and seeming motivated about this new position, but also not coming across as someone who is always available? Thank you so much. First and foremost, never ever make yourself available. Don't log on after hours, don't send emails, don't initiate conversations. Like, even if you, like, sometimes I'll work in the evenings, but I schedule my emails generally so that they arrive in the morning, not just for me and setting the right tone for myself, but also so that other people don't feel like they're obligated to jump on in the evenings or on weekends or what have you. So first and foremost, setting that example yourself is really, really important. A lot of people get into a vicious cycle where they do it and then it's expected of them. Beyond that, there may be occasions where you do work over your hours and you are not compensated for it. This is pretty common at salaried jobs. I've never worked a salaried job where that hasn't been the case. We try to account for it as best we can at TFD. We're already starting on a 4-day work week, so that does help. But, sometimes it's inevitable that, like, for example, if we have a big event we're producing, sometimes we will work overtime that week. And it's impossible to tell always whether or not it exactly is compensated for or counted for. We just try to encourage people to take time off after that. We also have 6 weeks PTO, which does, help make sure that people are getting their time back. But in general, a lot of this comes down to company culture and norms. So it really is up to you to sort of look around and be aware of the kinds of dynamics that are being created at this work environment, and realize that you may happen to be in a work environment where constant overwork is a real problem and is not compensated, in which case you may think, I need to just stay at that job for not as long as I would other jobs, and look at it as a stepping stone to a place that has a better company culture. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to come back every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday for new and awesome videos. Goodbye.